The biggest misunderstanding while being an integrative vet is that people don't really see the value until they're really, really sick and they realize that nothing else works. And not everyone is on that journey. That's what's making this big gap between holistic and conventional. I kind of stopped to pause, like maybe there is more. Maybe there is more than we already know. Maybe there are different ways of doing things. As with me, as with many other people, it needs to go to a point where you're desperate and you need something else and you're willing to do anything to get better. And both people and pets today are living this. They're living with chronic issues and it just keeps getting worse and they don't get the help. Here's another bottle of steroids, here's some more antifungals, here's some antibiotics. There you go. And it doesn't solve the issues. I started on that journey. I was desperate. I tried everything and I was tired of it. I went to doctor after doctor. They said, there's nothing we can do for you. And I should prove them wrong in every single aspect, and that integrated its way into the way I practice medicine today.
Welcome to the DAFY podcast, the place where you will get expert-led and science-backed advice on dog health and nutrition. No more confusion and no more conflicting opinions. Just clear guidance to help you make informed decisions for your pup. Because when it comes to our dogs, they deserve the very best care. And we, as dog parents, deserve confidence in the choices we make for them. Let's meet an expert. Tina, welcome to the DAFY podcast. It's so great to have you on today.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I am as well. So when I reached out to you a couple of months ago, I said, would you like to join the DAFY podcast? You said yes. I remember I was asking you, what would you like to talk about? What topics would you like to cover? And you gave me like a slightly different answer to the other experts I've been talking to. You said, I would love to talk about, kind of like my personal experience, my personal issues that led me to become who I am today and treat animals the way I treat animals today. So let's start with that. You just tell us a little bit about your background, and what brought you to, do what you do every day.
Yeah. I think it's a good start because I feel like maybe the biggest misunderstanding while being an integrative vet is that people don't really see the value until they're really, really sick and they realize that nothing else works. And not everyone is on that journey. So I really feel that that's what's making this big gap between holistic and conventional. Because obviously I've been there. I was born into quite a conventional family. We did everything according to book. There was Western doctors and so on and so on. And then a certain element happened in my life that I kind of stopped to pause, like maybe there is more. Maybe there is more than we already know. Maybe there are different ways of doing things. And over the years, I started struggling with health issues and autoimmunity quite early in my life and didn't really think much of it. It's like, yeah, here's some steroids, just keep on using it. But it sparked a question, like sometimes I have it, sometimes I don't. Like what is triggering it? And I think, of course, as with me, as with many other people, it needs to go to a point where you're desperate and you need something else and you're willing to do anything and read anything to get better. Mm-hmm. So I think I reached that point in the beginning of vet school. I was just sick all the time. I had, autoimmunity and chronic issues, and then it would be like opportunistic infections, different types, different places all the time. Every morning I wondered, what symptom am I going to wake up with today? And it gets, you start almost to become a hypochondriac, you're like, what is going on? Because this is not normal. But the fact is that so many, both people and pets today are living this. They're living with chronic issues and it just keeps getting worse and they don't get the help. Here's another bottle of steroids. Here's some more antifungals. Here's some antibiotics. There you go. And it doesn't solve the issue. And I think that's what led me to this point of buying a book, actually, of like how to use diet and lifestyle to get rid of a lot of your issues. And so I started on that journey. I was desperate. I tried everything. I was constantly on antibiotics, steroids, and antifungals, and I was tired of it. And I went to doctor after doctor. They said, there's nothing we can do for you. Diet has, doesn't matter. And just I should prove them wrong in every single aspect. And I think that integrated its way into the way I practice medicine today as well. So, I'm Norwegian, and then I went to vet school in Poland. And then I started this journey of really strict detox and elimination diet. And then within like a couple of weeks, I saw like all of my issues were kind of just melting away. And I was like, oh my God, like why? I know people say the diet's important, blah, 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 but I didn't realize exactly how important it can be. And for me, that made a huge difference in my life. And I felt like my chronic issues now was within my control, and I could recognize the triggers, and I knew the things that was going to make me ill. And I eventually found remedies that could help me throughout these periods that were going to be more stressful or difficult. You know, as a human, going out to eat and all these things can be very, very difficult. And so yeah, that's basically where it started for me. And then I started listening to actually Karen Becker, who's one of the first. I see you have her book in the back there.
Always. And Rodney.
Yes, exactly. That was what I started listening to in early vet school days, and it really resonated with me and it made sense. But then I was always wondering why is my vets in class always saying something different? Why aren't they mentioning these things? And in the beginning, you know, I started picking the fight. I was like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And then I would just realize in the way that the vets were answering that they had no clue about this and no interest in it. And so I
That
eventually I
must be so difficult, right? Like, how do you deal with that? Because this is the vets that then are going to be into practice. And this is why I think there is such a, like divider between conventional vets and holistic vets. How do you deal with that as a student that is just studying and has a completely different opinion and, experiences and things like that?
it was hard.
Mm.
It was really hard. And I think a part of me were trying to suppress and not look too hard into it because it was interfering with everything that I learned in many ways. Like, yes, it's integrative. So, yes, this can work, but I also know a better option. And it took me a lot to shut up, to not argue with the teacher in every class. But what if you do this? But what about root cause? What about that? And it would just piss all the teachers off. So, I really had to put myself together and just shut up. So, I had to bury
Bite
a
your
lot.
tongue.
Yeah, bite my tongue. Exactly. It was difficult, definitely.
Yeah, I can imagine because it's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's like you need to have a degree to become a vet, don't you? And that's the reality of it. And everyone just needs to follow the same path. But then you have, and this is what I find totally crazy is, I've been having conversation with both sides, right? Like normal vets, traditional vets, and holistic vets, and there is always this huge divider, like huge. It's kind of like traditional vets are like, wow, there are no studies about this. There is nothing that proves it. And then you've got the holistic people there. I tell you what, this is the thing I see the most. Is based on their personal experiences. They dig deeper into things and they research more and they have different experiences at the end of the day, which, like they helped animals that were really sick. They saw animals thrive on like a better, more, like a less processed diet and things like that, whatever we want to talk about, less vaccinations. And I'm like, well, you both have the same degree, but how is it that there is such a big divider? And how can owners navigate through that, in your opinion?
That's a very good question. I think, yeah, one of the reasons for the big gap is that you haven't gotten there until you have, if that makes sense. I didn't believe in anything before this whole journey. I was like, diet doesn't really matter that much. You know, for me at the time, I couldn't really see the difference clearly because it didn't really make a big enough difference. And maybe I wasn't sick enough. So I think sometimes it takes a lot before you're investing into trying something different. And then when you actually do and you see that it works, and then the things that you start to learn, there's no going back. And
Yeah.
then you become an opponent of all the things because now you see all the lies, they're right in front of you, and you want to speak up. And then you push it forward in a provoking way, and then it becomes this like war between like, this is how it is, no, this is how it is. And then yeah, it's hard to find that middle ground, I think.
Yeah. It's really hard, isn't it? Because it's like all the people I've been talking to, they clearly love animals. And it's not like something that is like, I don't love animals and I want to do something bad to them. I want something bad to happen in either side of the kind of like the scenario. And this is why I find it really difficult because I'm like, people truly believe what they're saying. It's not like they're lying or they've been paid by someone. And like, I was talking to a traditional vet a few months ago, and we were talking about vets get paid when they sell kibble and things like that. And they were like, absolutely no, we don't get paid for that. And then it's like, And you're just like there as a dog owner and you hear all of these things and you're just like, what do I do? Like, who do I believe to? And what is the truth? And what should I be following? And yeah, what do you think about that? Like, I'm a dog owner and I'm so confused about everything that is out there because let's talk it, like very honestly, there is so much out there.
There is. And the reason why it's so confusing too is because it is several parts to a story. And once you start looking into things, there might be something in what they say, but then there might be another side to it. So it is very complicated. And I think either you have to look really deeply into it yourself, not just take someone's word for it, but look through the studies and talk to people that really knows about this when it comes to, for example, selling kibble. So a hired vet in practice does not profit from selling kibble. That is true. But do you know what I just found out? Because a lot of my friends our colleagues are practice owners, is that I think as much as it can be up to over 20% of the clinic's income comes from selling kibble.
Yeah.
So yes, of course, the practice makes a lot of money. Sometimes it's a crucial part of their income to sell kibble.
Yeah.
And it's harder to do this with raw food because it is more expensive to begin with, because the ingredients are not just rice and fillers and leftovers. It is actual food in there, and it's a lot more expensive that way.
Yeah.
It's much harder to profit from it. So
Yeah.
that's why a lot of practices still like to have the kibble. Even I know integrative practices that still have it because they know the owners wants to buy it, and it is very profitable for the clinic to sell it.
Yeah.
So no, I think a hired vet definitely has no intention in making money off of it, but the practice might have it because they can earn a lot of money from selling kibble.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I agree with that. I always say as well, it's like every expert I've been talking to is not literally the vet itself that is earning money. At the end of the day, these companies are partnering with the vets to achieve that basically. And it's really, yeah, it's really sad and it's really difficult. And you see that every single day. But like, can we tell owners why is kibble bad? Because again, every expert I've been talking to, they're like, every dog is different. Some dogs thrive on kibble, some dogs thrive on fresh diet. Why should an owner move away from kibble or ultra processed food and move into more of a more natural kind of like type of food for their dogs?
Yeah, I think a lot of owners say I cannot switch him from kibble because anything else gives him a bad tummy. And I think in that sense, you just really haven't done the transition right. You just really haven't found the right diet for this dog, because every dog, I think, should be able to thrive on a fresh food diet. So I talk a lot about this actually in a video course, 3 hours long, that is on my website. Which is called How to Choose the Right Pet Food. Because I think there's a lot of courses out there about nutrition and like how to build your bowl, but I think in reality, I think all of us at some point need to buy commercial pet food just because of time limitations, from maybe finance, something like this. So I think it's crucial for every dog owner to know what to look for, because you can ask a person in your local area, they can have one opinion, or another opinion, and somewhere else they recommend something that they don't sell in your area. So in this course, I really put it together so that every owner in every area should be able to go into their pet store and just look and kind of have an awareness of what quality is in the food that they're buying. Because cheap, more expensive doesn't necessarily mean it's better, actually. So you really need to know what you're looking for. But it can be really simple once you learn what to look for. You know the buzzwords on the packaging that they use. You know the cooking method of the diet is very important for nutrient loss and what happens within the foods. When they say that kibble isn't good for you, what do they mean? Why are all these vets talking about ultra-processed food being bad? For people, this is quite obvious. Most people might not know exactly why, they just know that it's bad and it's accepted. It's widely accepted. But in pets, it's not really gotten to that point yet because of everything that's happened in evolutionary money, companies, and so on and so on. So the things that we look at in ultra-processed food that can be harmful to pets over time, and this is done studies on as well. Dog Risk have done loads of studies on this, comparing ultra-processed foods with fresh food diets, with homocysteine levels, the levels of allergies in puppies. They have plenty of studies that you can go.
University of Helsinki, isn't it? They did a big study on that.
Exactly. So they
Yeah.
have lots of good studies to look at that as well. So it also really depends on just what studies you look at. And I also think it's about who's reading the study, because I've had a lot of colleagues sending me studies that for me is very questionable. And actually they're mentioning in many of these studies that fresh food diets might be beneficial for pets. I'm promoting it in the clinic and they're like, oh, but it's bacteria. And they send me this, a study that with the potential harm of zoonotic spread of disease. And actually within some of these studies, they even mention that feeding fresh food might be health beneficial for the dog. And I just think it's funny. So yeah, some of the things that we do look at when we look at ultra processed food. What do we have? We usually have loss of omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory. We usually end up with really high levels of omega-6, especially in kibble. So you have, and it also doesn't oxidize as easily. So you usually have a food full of omega-6, and even when you open the bag, it oxidizes. You lose so many of the omega-3s, and there's so much omega-6 left, which is very omega-6 heavy, which can put them in a more pro-inflammatory state. So I think that's a key word here today is inflammation. I've also made some previous content on like the risks of kibble versus fresh food, raw food. And, both of them do carry risk. It's not that kibble doesn't carry any risks. There are plenty of cases of death because of melamine intoxication, because they want to boost the protein levels, and aflatoxins that come from mold. It is actually very common because when you have a big bag and you don't use it, within a few weeks to a month, eventually it starts to oxidize. You get rancid fats that are carcinogenic. You get molds and aflatoxins that can, in small amounts, can cause chronic inflammation and disease and is really bad for their organs. So there are so many elements to this, and there's, improper storage, and then you have, the high heat processing of all these ingredients. Firstly, very poor ingredients in many of these pet foods. So if any like conventional vets, probably not, to watches this, just please look at the ingredient bag of the pet food that is sitting in your aisle in the clinic and just think for yourself what you think about it, because it just surprises me that not more people questions it when they look at the ingredients list. It's all meat meals and byproducts and rice, and it's like, how is this meant to be healthy?
Yeah, this is what I hear all the time. So I was like, when I talk to these kind of traditional experts, all I hear is, wow, but, brown rice is actually very nutritious. Meat meal, yes, we hear the word meal, we think is really bad, but actually it is a way of, removing the waste from the environment. And it's actually really good nutrients because there is a heart, liver, la, 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 la. So that's what I hear. Again, I personally am more of a holistic person when I look after Rusty. But what is your view when your vet says to you, wow, these ingredients are actually really nutritious and they are needed, and, and things like that, because that's what people
Yeah.
say.
So the first thing I do want to mention is really if we look at the guidelines, because when we create foods that are complete and balanced, we're making them from a set of guidelines made by the NRC that are now improved by AFCO and FEDIAF. And when you look at these guidelines, they're all made on the basis of ultra processed food, so canned or kibble. And basically you have to look at what happens after all this high heat processing. You lose a lot of nutrients, and I go through this in my course as well, that you lose a lot of nutrients, and then you need to kind of add extras just to make sure that there is some left by the end of the processing. So you have really high levels of certain things, especially those that are very heat sensitive. So even when you try to formulate a complete and balanced meal, if you do it with fresh food, you really start to see weird stuff, because there is like no way to put just like healthy normal ingredients and create a perfectly complete and balanced diet. Like you really need to think hard and add extra stuff, maybe feed them extra, add, weird ingredients that a dog would never eat to meet these criteria, because they're not based on fresh food. And I think that's where I see a huge gap. Like if like, for example, meeting the calorie need is actually really hard. If you don't use like rice or something else, meeting that expected amount of calorie on the certain amount of food is almost impossible. So you really have to add like really high fatty calorie rich things or rice to meet the caloric need, even if you're already over the amount that you would recommend for that dog. Another thing is, for example, linoleic acid is really hard to meet with the meat itself. And this is an omega-6 fatty acids. And the funny thing is, omega-3s are actually not required to specific high amounts in the diet because they can synthesize this from ALA. But the thing is, some of the omega-6 they cannot. So then the food usually have a lot more omega-6 to meet the standards. And I don't care so much about the omega-3s. And then we already know about like how omega-3 levels, omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is really important. But then, you know, it's very heavy in omega-6 oils usually. They don't care so much about the omega-3s. And then it's also such a big difference between the product that you use. You know, if you look at the omega-3 levels in a grass-fed beef compared to one that is grown up inside eating grains, it's actually a huge difference between the vitamin and mineral level in the meat itself. So I also think it comes back to the quality, plus you're adding vegetable oils to meet those very specific standards. So yeah, I think the first thing is we really need new guidelines for fresh food.
Yeah.
That's the first one.
That's so interesting, isn't it? I completely agree with you. And it's like the reality of it as well is like we think that all of these big kibble brands are all like complete and balanced. For example, I saw a study the other day that they just released in the UK. I don't know if you've seen it, when they were reviewing vegan diets and they compared it to kibble, and they realized that almost none of the food they compared it to was actually complete and balanced in the first place. So it's kind of like, you know, and that's for me my biggest issue, right, that I've got, because I'm a regular dog owner, but I've been into nutrition for the last 5 years. So I always go and question. I'm very curious. I'm very I just want to see both sides of the story. And I hear all the time, well, you know, the big brands out there, they have lots of studies, lots of, you know, like that food is really good for your dog and you should be feeding that food and things like that. And then I go and look and I'm like, but where are all these studies? Like, I can't see all of these studies. And he's like, when you go and question, but it's true, isn't it? When you go and question it, they're like, oh, we can't share that information. I'm like, can you give me, you know, and that's the thing that really gets me is when you talk to traditional vets, they're like, well, these companies have got the science behind it. So that's why we go for them. That's why we recommend them. But then you go and question the big brand and they say, that's why you should go and question these fresh food, raw food companies a lot more, because, you know, you don't know who's formulating the diet, you don't know where the ingredients are coming from. But I'm like, if I go and pick a big brand, how do you know where the ingredients are coming from? How do you know how they've been processed? How do I know, you know, because that information is not shared. I can't find it as a dog owner. I was questioning Royal Canin like a few months ago about the fresh new range that they developed. And I was like, can you give me a full nutritional breakdown of the range? They're not happy to share that. And so I'm like, well, then why will I trust a big, you know, food brand that is backed by science by many, many years, but then I can't get that information? So this is the thing that kind of like really gets me in a way. And I'm like, you know, why would I just go and decide to go like use them when actually I can't see this research? Yes,
Yeah.
okay, not much research on fresh, fair enough, but it's more new. It's not like something that's been around, you know, since kibble was around. And fair enough, there is not that much. But if I see my dog thriving on it, then I'm like, you know, well, 2 + 2. And that's kind of the thing. But yeah, I don't know what your view is on that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think you need to do your own research and you need to use your own brain.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people take their own common sense out of the equation. Oh, but a study said it, so it must be right. You know, studies are often proven and then disproven again, and then they prove something else. You know, it's a continuous process.
Changes all the time.
You know, reading the research is very important and taking, you know, what you can out of it. But I think also sometimes reading the study and not just listening to what someone said about a study is important, because sometimes you hear someone bashing a study and then you go into the study and then it's like, wait, that's like not at all what they're saying here. That's like a fraction of it, or they're putting things apart. You know, depends on who reads it and what information they extract from something. I think it's not as black and white, a lot of things. And
Yeah, I agree with you. It's like, you know, it's normal people trying to read a study when you've never been in vet school and you don't understand the details behind all the wording in it. It's pointless, isn't it? Because then, yeah, you just pick and choose what is convenient for you. Yeah, I completely agree. So let's talk about, we have a dog with chronic illness. So you said your journey started with that, and this is why you've become who you've become. So I'm a dog owner. I've got a dog with either allergies or itching, IBD, IBS, some kind of sort of chronic illness. What would your recommendation be around like caring for them in the best possible way?
Yeah, so obviously when they come in, it depends how bad it is when they come in, and if they're already holistically minded, if they're already feeding fresh food, if they're like, depends a lot on the owner. Obviously, I prefer a more holistic route, but not everyone. Someone wants a pill, which we do. But if they want a more holistic approach, it depends how bad it is when it comes in. I'm an integrative vet, so obviously, if there's a fire, I will put out the fire. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
If the dog really is really itchy or really have a lot of symptoms, we will treat it with medication to help the dog feel better, and then we'll set them on a plan. So depending on what the root issues are, I will generally recommend a lifestyle change, trying to remove as many toxins from the environment as possible, ensuring proper exercise in preferably non-toxic areas. If they have allergies, there can be supportive things you can do, like washing off their paws of the dog before you go inside. Certain remedies that can be helpful in short terms, and herbs. And then it comes to what is the root of this problem, and then again becomes a question of finance, how much the client can do, and then if we have a full go, obviously, then we can do a lot of testing. So we'll do, blood testing, maybe fecal testing. Maybe we can check for leaky gut. We can do check the microbiome, because when it comes to a lot of chronic illness, it roots down in a dysbiosis as one of the either secondary or primary cause. And then if you can't fix that, a lot of times, especially in young animals, that's what I really, really like, is when they come to me like, he's a little bit, he's starting to lick his paws a little bit, or he was itching his eyes a little bit, or maybe just like a little bit, the small things. If they come in at this point, I'm so happy, because usually just a lifestyle and a diet change sometimes is actually enough to cure the dog. And they'd never need to go on Apoquels for years and years and take cytopoint injections every month, all these things.
Yeah.
So really trying to repair the gut. But often, unfortunately, when they come to me, they've already been sick for years and years. And so if anyone's listening to this and they want to work with a holistic veterinarian online, which I do online consults, is you don't have to wait until your animal is dying to come in, We are working, holistic practitioners are working really hard on prevention. So if you come in, even when they're healthy, we can make a diet plan to prevent anything from happening. Or they have a small thing, that maybe your Western practitioner will miss and dismiss as normal. We will most likely think of a cause and try to work out some things that can work to make it better, or maybe make it go away. And then you might not ever have that issue. So the earlier you come to see us, the better your outcome will be, because a lot of the cases that come in are 10 to 14 years old. They have cancer, they have allergies, they have IBD, they have everything. And just like getting to the root of that, especially working online, is quite challenging. Not impossible, but it takes a lot of work. So just if you come in as soon as possible, we can prevent it from happening, and we can work with you the whole way from the tiniest symptom, and we can put out the fire before it becomes a big thing or becomes a bigger manifestation of disease.
Yeah, I love the fire analogy. So we were together at the National Dog Expo this year, right? We didn't realize that, but this is why I reached out to you. But
Yes.
Dr. Brady was talking about that, and he's talked about it as well on the podcast I recorded. And this is so true, isn't it? It's kind of like, especially when you talk about allergies. I was building like a mini course about this, where it's essentially what Dr. Brady is saying is we are essentially putting a tape over a smoke alarm, and whilst the house is on fire, right? So we keep giving them Apoquel, Cytopoint, all the medication, and it's like, well, we're not fixing the gut. So you can give them, like whatever you want to give them. If the gut is not fixed, the issue is still going to come back tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, when the steroids medication are not working anymore, or, you stop giving it to them. And this is the thing. So you talked about the gut. That's something that I generally believe, after talking to so many people and speaking to dog owners, it's so underrated, isn't it? Like, no one talks about the gut microbiome. And I interviewed Carol Hughes as well. And which she was at the National Dog Expo. And I just find it crazy. I've learned so much about the gut, but can you tell us why is the gut so important? And also, why don't you think vets address the gut in the way it should be addressed often enough.
Because we don't learn about this in vet school, you know?
Interesting.
We learn about parasites, we learn about different diseases with an itis or different names with Latin origins, you know. We learn only those kind of things, but no one's actually like talking about the gut. I think maybe it was mentioned once from a pretty good vet that we had, like, oh, by the way, the gut microbiome when you take antibiotics. It was maybe mentioned once, but it's not something that is focused on at all, at least not in our school systems or any health that I've heard of in Europe, unfortunately. It's quite I think it's quite a new theory, and it's not that much science behind like the leaky gut theory and all that yet, which is why it's probably not a common knowledge yet, so it's not talked about enough. So it's completely overlooked, and there's so many things that can destroy the gut microbiome. You've probably talked about this with Carol, then she's a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
But everything starting from, you know, glyphosate in the environment, and even high levels found in kibble that are destroying the bacteria in our gut, you know, feeding the same food for their entire life, just no variation in the biome at all. Stress, or, you know, lack of, you know, being outside in the soil, and just all these antiparasitics and antibiotics and all that is just drenched on our dogs. And I was reflecting a lot upon this the other day as well, talking about like parasites and how we coexist with our pets. Because in nature, you know, these animals would never receive antiparasitics and stuff like that. And now in a lot of countries, they actually get them every month, to keep parasites away, or not actually as a repellent, but to kill them. It's a
Yes.
toxin in their blood that, you know, kills them. And then I sent out a newsletter recently as well about, you know, parasites, because when you work with wild animals, majority of them have parasites.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, majority of the parasites are just living there rent-free. They're not necessarily causing an issue. So when the animal is healthy themselves, the parasites just live with them.
Yeah.
But when they then become ill, that's when you get an overgrowth, or like a lot of it, that can start damaging things. So once they do get ill, they do get ill a lot faster, and that might be why they have a shorter lifespan, for example, than us. And we are so lucky to have something to treat that. So when our immune system is down, we can treat it. But then comes the question of zoonosis, because that's like the biggest topic of like all things that we treat in our dogs and cats, is because of zoonosis, because we're scared that humans gonna get sick, not because we're scared that our pets are gonna get sick.
Yeah.
So majority of the reasons they're pushing antiparasitics, for example, in the UK, every 3 months at least, for fleas every month. This is mostly because of the toxoplasma in the soil, and, you know, children's playground, and they, you know, put, especially because the ones that are most predisposed to these parasites are children, sick people, or elderly. So it is to protect, you know, ourselves. So that's why we're giving them these toxins basically every month, to protect ourselves. And that's kind of what we're doing with the diet as well, because, you know, humans are a lot more sensitive to a lot of things compared to animals' acidic stomachs. So then we just end up giving them it's not sterile, but semi-sterile food, which is a lot lower in certain bacteria, because we're scared of, you know, children touching the poop or the food and touching their mouth and getting some kind of bacteria. And now the biggest issues with this tend to be, it is the risk of antibiotic resistant bacteria. That's like the huge thing that everyone's always talking about now. They're looking at it in all studies, proving that, you know, trying to prove that raw food is more dangerous for spread of antibiotic resistant bacteria. And then I'm just like taking a step back. What is the cause of antibiotic resistant bacteria? Is it because our dogs eat what they're supposed to eat, or is it because we're overusing antibiotics in our livestock?
Because they're getting sick from what we're giving them instead of giving them what they should be having, really.
Exactly. So the thing is also, you know, most of the time, and I've seen actually quite a few vets posting this on social media recently as well. This dog died because of anemia because it was eaten by fleas. A healthy dog would never be eaten up by fleas.
Yes.
A healthy dog would never be eaten up by fleas. There was something wrong with that dog.
Yeah.
And they're not sharing that. They're saying this dog got eaten by fleas, so you have to give your dog antiparasitics to save their life. That's just not the case, because a healthy pet would never be eaten alive by a flea. If they have immune dysregulation, they can get flea dermatitis, allergic reactions, yes. But in itself, just healthy animals are rarely that severely affected. So there must have been something else going on underneath that they probably didn't find. So yeah, I think that's it's just a few things that really frustrates me when it comes to publicity and Western doctors posting things. And
Yeah, no, I agree with you, because then then it's just misinformation that it's just out there and a lot of people believe it. And you just how do yeah, it's so hard, isn't it? It's just really, really hard because no one just ever looks at the big picture. And yeah, you're right. It's just, that is literally, you said it beautifully. And again, going back to the gut microbiome, 70 to 80% of, the immune system cells, they live in the gut microbiome. So if we can fix that, and there have been so many studies on humans about the gut microbiome. We share how many, like with our DNA with dogs, like they have they have a shorter digestive tract, they have a shorter acidity, but we share so much with dogs. And it's like, the issue can be fixed so easily that, you can save your dog so much pain through years of going through this medication, years of having a weakened immune system, years of being really poorly. And I see it every day and it breaks my heart so much. I ran a doggy daycare and boarding business for the last 3 years, and I have so many poodles on these drugs every single day. And I just see how sick they get. And when they get sick, how difficult it is for them to get better. That just breaks my heart because, and obviously all my owners are like, wow, I trust my vet. My vet has told me to do that. And I'm just there listening to it. And I'm just like, no, this is just not, it's not right. But the reality of it is so many people do listen to the vet every single day. And that's where we are, and yeah, it's interesting.
In my opinion, anything acute, anything that needs treatment should go and see, a Western clinic. If they break
Yeah.
a leg, if they get really sick from something, if there's something acute, they need medication. But I think for anything chronic, you really have to see a holistic practitioner because, it's like two different branches now. And Western medicine addresses acute things beautifully. We have so many surgical techniques for, congenital things. If they're born with something bad, if they break a leg, teeth that are bad that needs to come out, there's so many beautiful things that we can do in Western medicine. But there are also so many things that we really cannot. And it's very difficult also as a holistic practitioner working in a Western practice, which I've been doing for some time now, because there's no space for it. There's no support from colleagues. If they go see another vet next time, they will say something completely different and the plan is off. You have maybe 15 minutes consult. You don't have time to ask any question. You don't have time to look at the background. You don't have time to really set a proper plan. You don't have time to talk to the client so they actually remember what you say. So that is a real issue that is just very difficult to address in a Western practice. And I know most people really would like to see a holistic practitioner in real life. And there are clinics like that out there still, becoming more popular, not very popular in Europe yet, unfortunately. But a lot of us work online. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this as well is simply because I will have more time. Because when you're in your clinic, you're paying for everything. You're paying for the place and you're paying for all the equipment and you're paying for every staff to sit there, so you don't have time for the vet talking to you that much. So by going online, I have smaller fees and I can not charge that much, and I can spend much more time on each client and actually feel like I'm helping them, not just throwing something at them and seeing if it works.
Yes, absolutely. That's such a good point, isn't it? Because there are not, again, that many people that do that online. And I think, look, the reality is, another one I'm going to be talking to for Rusty is Sue Armstrong, who was also the natural dog expert. She's also an expert in chronic illnesses. And I had a chat with her, but she's going to look after Rusty now. And, she said it might be difficult because it's like, look, I don't have the animal in front of me. But there is so much you can do online once you get the history of the dog. And, especially if it's not like an emergency kind of issue, that you're like, okay, my dog is in trouble. He needs to see a vet right now. But if it's a chronic illness that a dog has lived for years and years and years, then that's something definitely like and this is what we were talking at the beginning. That was before we started recording, but we said, there are not that many holistic vets out there. Well, they actually not normally in practice. And that's why you want to do like a good piece of research, see who's around your area, try and find someone, even online consultation, that can help your dog live a better life. And that's really what matters the most.
Yes, exactly. This is what I'm doing in my online consults as well. I'm taking animals on as a referral patient. I actually also have specifically designed own consults just for like nutrition and lifestyle,
Yeah.
just so people can get a good start.
Yeah.
And then I've created courses like my nutrition course just about how to pick the right commercial
Yeah.
pet food near you, because that's decisions that someone always has to take. And if you just have the knowledge to know exactly what food is good for what, then you can always choose the best food. You know, times are changing. It's hard to know and trust other people's recommendations. So if you just know, then you can just choose for yourself. And that's why
Yeah.
that course is so important. Sorry. So, but yeah, but the referral, what I do with the referrals as well is that I get all the history of the animal, and then I make a little timeline, and then I try to connect the dots as to what some of the things why they might have happened, and then I discuss the timeline with the owner, and then try to figure a plan. So obviously, depending on the underlying issues, we usually change the diet and the lifestyle. I usually get them on a lot of supplements and nutraceuticals. If either depending on how acute it is, we might do some further testing as well. I often recommend Carol Hughes doing microbiome testing
Yeah.
because it is very helpful.
Yeah.
And then one thing that I've gotten a lot more into recently is hair mineral analysis. So I've done a
Interesting.
certification. Yeah, so I've done a certification on how to read hair mineral analysis.
Yeah.
And you know, the research is still quite fresh in animals, so we're still trying to connect the dots, but it's just showing such promising results in humans. And that's just from talking to colleagues and watching case studies and doing it on myself. Honestly, I did a HMA recently, and it just literally summed up all of my issues. And it seems like
Really.
I can get, yeah, it seems like if I can just get that, I have too much copper. If I can get that copper under control.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're right, isn't it? You do like normally a blood test. I remember I was doing one on Rusty like a couple of years ago. And it's like one vet was telling me, well, actually, the difference between just a regular blood test and a hair analysis, what it gives you is totally different, isn't it? And
Yes.
how does that work?
So when you take a blood test, you can test for slightly different things, but everything that your body needs right now is taken into the blood, right? So some things can be low or high without you necessarily noticing it on a blood test, because a blood
Yeah.
test really snapshot in time. You cannot see the overall deficiency or excess over time. It's just right now. And usually your body needs it, so the appropriate levels will always be in the blood. But when you go to the roots of your hair, things
Yeah.
are growing out slowly, and you will have all these elements in the hair, and that will be one of the first places it takes it from. So if you have a nutrient that you need, a mineral, then we'll withhold it from the hair, put it into the blood, and take it where it needs to be. So that's why it's so nice to look at the hair, because you can really see over time what's the big excess or deficiency. And it really can really give you some very valuable information, especially in those cases that, you know, you cannot find anything else. It's just, and everything looks fine, but they're still having some issues. That's just like a really, really cool tool, because it can
Yeah.
take, like, actually tell you so much about the internal environment. It can tell you about their hormonal health and how the hormone works, because sometimes the hormones are enough on the blood test, so you don't have a deficiency or hypothyroidism, but actually it's working sluggishly, and that you can see on the test. So you can be like a slow metabolic type, for example. It can show heavy metals in the body, things that, you know, can't be tested well otherwise. And then all the elements as well can tell you a lot
Yeah.
of the internal environment. So I really loved my results, because they really spoke up about all my issues just related to a couple of
Yeah.
minerals that are way too high. Yeah, so we're interested in doing it more on animals, and
Yeah.
using it as.
I never done one either. It's interesting. I'll ask you like later to just send me the link. So that's a really good point though, isn't it? 'Cause from a preventative care, right? So you have a dog. I have a dog and I want my dog to live as happily and as, healthily as possible. What would you say are your like biggest steps to do early from an owner perspective to work on the preventative care in the best possible way?
So I guess I'm going to say the same as probably every other holistic vet that has been on
Yeah.
here. Early detoxing is important, trying to really minimize the toxin exposure. People say, oh, you know, we don't know the reason for cancer. No, we do. There's a huge list of like carcinogens. We just don't care about them. We keep
Because we
eating.
can't see it with our eyes.
Exactly.
No one
So,
cares about it.
yeah, limiting toxins from everywhere, both your environment inside and outside, limiting, you know, not over-vaccinate, take care of their microbiome, go out in dirt and make sure that they spend a lot of time outside. This is also important to minimize EMFs and to get proper radiation from the earth. So yeah, good microbiome health, a good quality diet. There are so many things we cannot always control in our environment, but we can control, well, majorly what goes into their bowl and their water. Yeah. So if you can keep their environment very clean, you can make sure they get a lot of outdoor time, social time, active time, and that they get good quality food and drink. And minimizing toxins through your vet visits, you've gotten really far as of your body's ability to be able to heal itself.
Yeah, I love that.
If you can, do a yearly visit to an integrative holistic vet or someone that does acupuncture, because I do TCVM as well. And when we do acupuncture, we can really see things that aren't necessarily having symptoms yet, but that might be issues in the future. So you can correct energetic imbalances before they become an issue. But like, if I have a pet coming in quite young and he doesn't have any symptoms, but then I start talking to the owner and she says, oh, he's actually really hot, he's panting all the time, he's a bit restless at night, his tongue is really red, and then I feel his pulses is quite strong, just like tiny things, maybe dandruff in the coat, just like the tiniest things can give me an indication of his internal system energetically. And we can, for example, change his diet to, in TCVM they have, all food have different energies as well. So you can use that to your benefit. So if your animals are really hot, you can give them a lot of cold foods to help them cool down. If they're very cold, you can give them heating foods. If we do see some early, heart deficiencies, we can add, those kind of things. Yeah. So yeah, I think a good preventive plan. And I'm, again, a big fan of hair mineral analysis, because you can also see things potentially before it becomes an issue. So yeah. This is amazing. Like 2.0 pet parents, obviously.
Yes, there you go, over there, always here. And I love that. So why would you do these two things as a dog owner from a preventative way?
Yeah, it will be more for like 2.0 pet parents that want to be sure that there is nothing underlaying. And I think sometimes owners have like a little gut feeling of something, but then their vet tells them that there's nothing wrong. But usually there is something, but it's just not something that they're known or trained in. So I think it would be nice just to be able to correct imbalances before it becomes a thing. Because usually what we see, especially if I put my Chinese hat on, if you look at an animal, and then sometimes in the end it can make sense why this animal got this disease just from looking at what it looked like a couple of years ago. Because actually we did see some changes in his energetics. Maybe his tongue was purple or yellow, or he had occasional diarrhea or something like that. We can kind of catch it early, and then we can try different things to see what works. And then, because usually holistic is a bit of a time. It is a bit time suck. It takes time, It's not like you fix it overnight. Rarely, anyway. Sometimes, you're lucky, but a lot of times it takes a long time. It takes a little bit of trial or error, or actually, as we talked about on the podcast yesterday, maybe not error, because you learn something, which is actually a good point. In Western medicine, it's very much, it was a fail, it didn't work. But actually, it's more like, it didn't work. What did that tell me? And then you learn from it, and then you take another step and you try something else. So yeah, it's a bit of a lengthy period. So yeah, really just addressing things as soon as possible could really help, because when things are already quite bad, they're going to need medication, which has side effects. So if we can grab it before it comes there, and we can work on it, maybe balance it before it becomes an issue, then you might not have any trouble in the first place. You might not need to give any medication, and you can avoid potential side effects.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And that's why it's for pet parents 2.0, because at the end of the day, it's not easy. I'm going to say that, to be a pet parent 2.0, and it takes effort, and we're not going to lie, it's expensive as well. It's really expensive, and it takes time, effort, and you really need to be invested into it. But the reward is, could that get me another 3-4 years with him? But look, one last question is, if someone is listening to this episode and would love to talk to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is www.purple.vet. Quite simple. I do offer consults, just general, for healthy pets. You can come to me even if your pet is healthy, if you're wondering what to feed and so on, if you want to create your own meals. I do nutrition and lifestyle consults. I have holistic referrals if you have a chronic issue that you want to talk to an integrative vet about. I do have a products page now, so you can find things like hair mineral analysis and microbiome testing and some supplements and stuff on my page directly. I do also have a couple of ebooks, some free ones, so you can download how to do elimination diets, what you can do for an older pet. And I also have a video course that I really advise anyone that has a dog or a cat to watch if they're buying commercial pet food, which I'm sure everyone does. I really wish that everyone could see it, because I just feel like everyone would be making so much better pet food choices if they just knew what was in it. So I go
Yeah.
through a bunch of things in there. And yeah.
You know what? I love to do a follow-up of this, talking about that, and maybe like link it back to your course, because I think there is not enough knowledge around that at all. And I think maybe a video explanation, or, just get the word out there. I think that's so valuable, isn't it? I love it. And I'll put a link to your details in the show notes anyway when the episode goes live. But yeah, Tina, thank you so much for joining us today. Like, I love the chat. I knew I was going to, but I really did.
Thank you for giving me a voice.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. And we will see you on the next episode. Thank you for watching. If you found this episode helpful, follow us on Instagram. And if you want first access to DAFY, join our waitlist now. The links are in the show notes.